Hello once again from the Prim Reaper. So, this month has really been a thing, hasn't it? I feel like my head is spinning from how quickly my life has changed. One moment I'm pulling my hair out doing my counseling practicum and 2 classes at once, to say nothing of everything else going on, and the next thing I know, COVID comes along and boots me out of both of those things, so now I've been auto-passed through my courses and continuing to work with clients from home. So it's been nice to have that sudden break, but the change in everything has been so dizzying that it still doesn't feel quite real. I'm just hoping that I can return more to a bit of a healthy balance now. There's been one subject I've been wanting to cover for a while, but I think I'm going to shelve it until next month because I've seen one article being passed around recently that I feel is timely to address, and yes, I know a few others have done this already, but A, I might have different things to say about it, and B, you might not have seen other people's takes on it anyway, so why not? It's called "The Coronavirus is a Disaster for Feminism." Because there's nothing quite like using a global emergency to push your ideology even further, right? I'm just envisioning someone sitting at their desk to pen this sort of thing. We should all be so grateful in this time of financial strain and reduced access to healthy sustenance and other necessities that this individual got paid to work from home to bless us all with this delightful food for thought. Well, let's grab a fork and dig in, shall we? Worry not, we'll just go over the juiciest bits. Enough already. When people try to be cheerful about social distancing and working from home, noting that William Shakespeare and Isaac Newton did some of their best work while England was ravaged by the plague, there is an obvious response. Neither of them had childcare responsibilities. The very first paragraph, and already we're getting just this miserable, pessimistic attitude that pervades the entire article. First of all, yes, people are trying to tell themselves whatever they need to hear in order to be able to stand the often very difficult experience of losing one's daily routine and ability to lead their lives in the way that they choose. So, when people are trying to give themselves motivation by comparing their situation to famous individuals who managed to accomplish great things in times of adversity, the response is not to say, "enough already," and crap all over other people's optimism just because you prefer to be miserable. The obvious response is not a snarky, "neither of them had childcare responsibilities." It's, "Wow, good for you for taking such a positive attitude. Go create the next Rembrandt, you go-getter, you." And the way these kinds of people talk about childcare kind of turns my stomach, if I'm being honest. There's always this sense of utter disdain, like such a task is at the depths of drudgery, the destruction of all their hopes and dreams as they know it. They never talk about childcare as though it's a source of joy that adds to their lives. It's always something that takes away from them, that drains them and prevents their own self-actualization. And I'm not saying that kids can't be draining or that you need to think the sun shines out of children's backsides in order to want to have them. But I am saying that having children is a choice, and if it's one that was going to get in your way so much, then maybe you should have thought a little harder before making that decision. I mean, it's almost like children are little people that need a lot of time and energy from their parents to grow into productive humans, and that for most people, that process is an enjoyable end in itself. But if your life goal is to pour yourself into finding a cure for cancer or becoming the president of the world or whatever, then yes, children are going to take away from the time that you can dedicate to doing that. Having children is absolutely not for everyone, and I fully respect the people who decide that they'd rather dedicate their life to their own personal goals. The people that go ahead and have children anyway and then proceed to complain about how much those children are then getting in the way of all their hopes and dreams, those are the people that I have little sympathy for. For those with caring responsibilities, an infectious disease outbreak is unlikely to give them time to write King Lear or develop a theory of optics. A pandemic magnifies all existing inequalities, even as politicians insist that this is not the time to talk about anything other than the immediate crisis. Working from home in a white-collar job is easier. Employees with salaries and benefits will be better protected. Self-isolation is less taxing in a spacious house than a cramped apartment. But one of the most striking effects of the coronavirus will be to send many couples back to the 1950s. Across the world, women's independence will be a silent victim of the pandemic. First of all, as someone with caring responsibilities, I've been completing my master's degree for the past year with a 4.0, thank you very much. Again, I'm not saying that childcare isn't hard at times, but it's not the ball and chain these folks are making it out to be. Furthermore, the inequalities that they listed are entirely gender neutral. Both men and women are equally capable of holding white-collar jobs with salaries and benefits. Not to mention, I feel like it's pretty plainly obvious to say that those with bigger places will find self-isolation more comfortable. Kind of like saying that those with $1 million will have an easier go of it. Yes, there are inequalities in our world. News at 5. But of course, our concern is the one true inequality of our time, the ubiquitous women's independence. Now, I scoff here not because I don't value a woman's right to choose the way she leads her life, obviously, but because of the one-dimensional and entirely predictable view of what constitutes women's independence that we will see outlined here shortly. I'm going to skip ahead a little to illustrate what I mean. At an individual level, the choices of many couples over the next few months will make perfect economic sense. What do pandemic patients need? Looking after. What do self-isolating older people need? Looking after. What do children kept home from school need? Looking after. All this looking after, this unpaid caring labor, will fall more heavily on women because of the existing structure of the workforce. It's not just about social norms of women performing care roles, it's also about practicalities, Wenham added. Who is paid less? Who has the flexibility? This feels faintly reminiscent of emotional labor. But joking aside, I'd like to ask why exactly we think this will fall more heavily on women. I mean, doubtless that it will, but why? Because it couldn't possibly be that women are more often choosing jobs that are paying less and prioritizing flexibility in their workplace that allows them to spend more time caring for their children on a regular basis anyway, could it? Nah, that would be crazy talk. But seriously though, it's ridiculous to act like the axe is going to fall solely or even primarily on women's work versus men's work in all of this COVID craziness. From everything I'm seeing, almost universally the dividing line is not gender, but the kind of jobs that people have chosen to do. So we're seeing a lot of direct service-oriented jobs falling by the wayside, e.g. serving in restaurants, dentists, teachers, etc. Meanwhile, essential jobs like running hospitals and keeping grocery stores stocked are running without fail. Let's just look at a list of common occupations by gender. For example, primary school teachers are mostly women, and yes, they're going to be out of work for a little while here, and therefore possibly more likely to be spending time at home caring for the kids. However, registered nurses are even more gendered in favor of women, and something tells me their jobs are going to be more secure for a long time here. Look at my situation, even. I have the good fortune to still be on maternity leave right now, but my job would allow me to work from home, and my husband's job is largely the same. The point I'm trying to get at is that it's no longer as simple to say that women are always expected to be the primary child caregiver. Many women do structure their work life so that they are the primary child giver, but again, this is a choice. I think whoever gets the brunt of the childcare responsibilities in this whole situation will be those who were unfortunate enough to have a career that was not considered essential at this time. According to the British government's figures, 40% of employed women work part-time, compared with only 13% of men. In heterosexual relationships, women are more likely to be the lower earners, meaning their jobs are considered a lower priority when disruptions come along. And this particular disruption could last months rather than weeks. Some women's lifetime earnings will never recover. With the schools closed, many fathers will undoubtedly step up, but that won't be universal. First of all, wow, that last sentence is seriously throwing some shade. Even if we were to assume that the majority of people continuing to work will be men, I'd like to know how it's not stepping up to continue to earn money for the family when crucial social services like childcare fall by the wayside. If we were to have a reverse situation where the father lost his job but not the mother, would we ever ever in a million years say that she is not stepping up by continuing to work her job rather than help with childcare? No, of course we would not, because that would be a seriously terrible thing to say, wouldn't it? Also, the rest of this paragraph just again goes along with what I've already been talking about. How is most of this not a choice? We know this from research time and time again. Men and women make career choices based on different things from each other most of the time. While men are more likely to prioritize earning power, women are more likely to choose careers based on personal fulfillment, flexibility, and ability to stay home if they choose to have children. This is a trend. This is by no means a universal decree from on high how it has to be. Women are entirely free to choose to become surgeons, astrophysicists, lawyers, you name it. Not that it really matters right now, as one of the most secure jobs seems to be a grocery store clerk, but there you go. For the men who are going to be out of work, I have a feeling their lifetime earnings are going to suffer just as much based on this particular disruption as well, because COVID doesn't discriminate based on sex. Oh wait, yes it does, as you already mentioned earlier in this article. Purely as a physical illness, the coronavirus appears to affect women less severely. Oh boy, whoops! Too bad we're not really concerned about any ways in which men might be more negatively impacted. We're only worried yet again about our own personal agenda. God, that drives me nuts. Men are not only apparently more likely to be hospitalized for this virus than women, but some estimates say they're nearly 2 times more likely to die from it than women. But nary even more than a sentence to talk about this hard fact, nor even a moment of gratitude to appreciate that we as women may in some ways, some very significant ways, I would say, have it easier in this scenario. No, it's immediately back onto the poor, pitiful me routine. It's honestly pretty offensive, and it makes you look like an ungrateful whiner. But anyway, moving on. Despite the mass entry of women into the workforce during the 20th century, the phenomenon of the second shift still exists. Across the world, women, including those with jobs, do more housework and have less leisure time than their male partners. Even memes about panic buying acknowledge that household tasks such as food shopping are primarily shouldered by women. I'm not afraid of COVID-19, but what is scary is the lack of common sense people have, reads one of the most popular tweets about the coronavirus crisis. I'm scared for people who actually need to go to the store and feed their fams, but Susan and Karen stocked up for 30 years. The joke only works because Susan and Karen, stand-in names for suburban moms, are understood to be responsible for household management rather than, say, Mike and Steve. Okay, so there's essentially 2 things to cover here. First of all, talk about overthinking a joke. Susan and Karen are essentially meme names at this point. If you look at videos of people going crazy and overstocking on toilet paper, you'll quite plainly see that it's equal parts Susans and Steves, so there goes that theory. Second, as to the comment about women doing more housework than their male partners, I'm going to give an example from my personal life that relates to this. I made a comment about needing to finish off some work, but also needing to clean the bathrooms. My husband responded to me, nobody's coming over anymore, so don't worry about it. And surely enough, I decided to put it off a little bit to finish off the few remaining more pressing things I needed to get done. Amazingly enough, the world hasn't ended for me leaving the bathrooms for a few extra days. What I'm getting at here is that maybe the reason why some women do more housework than men is because those women care more about the state of certain things in their households than the men do. Maybe it's not their man's priority that the kitchen counters are free of any crumbs, or that the front doorway is immaculately swept. Maybe if those women decided not to worry about those chores, they would be able to relax too. Or hey, maybe their partners would eventually reach a point where they would decide to help do the chores after all. Or, I know this might be a novel idea for some, couples could have a discussion about how each of them feels about the importance of certain chores in the house, and then could come to some sort of agreement on how to do things. I mean, is this really all that challenging? Not to mention, I've seen couples where the reverse is true. The woman is the messier of the two, and it's the guy that does the housework more often. To say nothing of how same-sex couples manage their households. It's again just trying to gender a situation where there are often other explanations for it, and I don't understand why we feel the need to do this. I'm going to cherry pick just a few more lines because I could talk about this article for an hour if I was inclined to do so, but I'm not. Look around and you can see couples already making tough decisions on how to divide up this extra unpaid labor. When I called Wenham, she was self-isolating with 2 small children. She and her husband were alternating between 2-hour shifts of childcare and paid work. That is one solution. For others, the division will run along older lines. Dual-income couples might suddenly find themselves living like their grandparents, one homemaker and one breadwinner. Literally providing an egalitarian example of how childcare is not always being shunted to women in the middle of an article talking about how childcare is almost always being shunted to women. But hey, let's not let that interrupt the narrative. There's a distortion of health systems. Everything goes towards the outbreak, said Wenham, who traveled to West Africa as a researcher during the Ebola crisis. Things that aren't priorities get cancelled. That can have an effect on maternal mortality or access to contraception. Well, golly gosh, gee Jiminy Willikers. It's almost like thousands of people dying from a novel virus kind of get priority treatment or something. I don't know why we're acting like this affects only women, or only mothers at that. I'm sure plenty of men and women who come in with things like heart attacks or other urgent conditions will be more likely to fall by the wayside as hospital resources become scarce. Look at Italy's situation where they are literally rationing intensive care services to people who are less likely to die. Is it any wonder that all systems are prioritizing those impacted by COVID right now? The British charity Women's Aid said in a statement that it was concerned that social distancing and self-isolation will be used as a tool of coercive and controlling behavior by perpetrators of domestic violence, and will shut down routes to safety and support. Well, given that domestic violence is perpetrated by both sexes and that men are in some reports just as likely to be victims of domestic violence as women, and in some reports even more likely, though women are more likely to be severely physically harmed, this is just yet another thing that doesn't need to be put forth in a gendered manner, does it? Grim as it is to imagine now, further epidemics are inevitable, and the temptation to argue that gender is a side issue, a distraction from the real crisis, must be resisted. What we do now will affect the lives of millions of women and girls in future outbreaks. And hey, we all know where your priorities lie, don't we? And I think it's a stretch to say the main concern is equality. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that for now. I hope that all of you, men or women, weather this storm in whatever ways make things easiest for you. Don't let anyone like this try to tell you how you ought to do things. Make the right choices for your family and leave the political ideologies behind. I'm sure we've all got enough nonsense to worry about right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.